Yeah, you're awesome.
Red. So excited to be here. Wow, what a great time to be in El Salvador, the birthplace of the strategic Bitcoin reserve strategy. I've certainly got a couple things I'll love to add to my conversation here if I got time on the end. For those of you that didn't see it, recently in the state of Pennsylvania, we were able to introduce a strategic Bitcoin reserve bill. Very exciting news, and there's going to be some more things that I can share with you on within the world of making the United States a leader on Bitcoin if I have a little bit of time at the end of my talk. I prepared this talk before any of that news broke, so I'm going to stick to my guns, stick to my plan here, and if I've got time at the end, I will certainly share some interesting information on the advent of strategic Bitcoin reserves within the United States. So I'm here to talk to you today about Bitcoin mining as a tool for energy abundance. But before I get into my talk, I want to share a little bit about my journey with Bitcoin. So 2017, I found Bitcoin and quickly became very attracted to the technology, fell in love with this technology. And right away, just like everybody else in this room, I realized that I needed to do something in Bitcoin. And so, of course, right away, I started to try to mine Bitcoin. But after getting a few machines in my basement, I had about 4 or 5 S9s. I was starting to deal with a lot of heat, a lot of noise. And so what did I do? I mocked up my little design here. This is my pre-design of the thing that I'm building in the middle, where I'm trying to figure out how do I navigate this area of trying to mine Bitcoin in my basement. Eventually, I get up to 16 ASICs in my garage, and I'm about to go all in on Bitcoin mining, but then the market crashes. So even though I didn't have the chance back then to go all in on Bitcoin mining, that passion and that love for Bitcoin mining carried forward into the launch of Satoshi Action in June of 2022. Right away with Satoshi Action, we immediately got to work traveling the country, educating lawmakers and regulators and the general public about the benefits of Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining. I traveled to state houses and to Washington, D.C. to share with lawmakers how this technology could be a benefit to the people of their jurisdiction. And what are some of those benefits? Well, Bitcoin mining can provide some extremely powerful benefits to the energy systems that we all operate on today. It can balance the grid, it can enhance clean energy, it can eliminate energy waste, it can create rural jobs as well, and it can also end energy poverty globally. As I traveled the country, talking to lawmakers and regulators, sharing those benefits, they all knew those were things they wanted and needed. I don't have to convince a lawmaker that they need to balance their grid. They already know they need that. I don't have to convince a lawmaker that they need rural jobs. They already know that they need more jobs in rural parts of the country that have been left behind. And so quickly after traveling the country, we got a lot of lawmakers to say, hey, you know what? I'm on board. I'm on board with Bitcoin, and I'm going to introduce legislation. And we have been fortunate to be able to introduce legislation to protect Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining in over 20 states. And we have passed pro-Bitcoin mining laws in 4 states in the United States so far. On top of that, one of the driving factors for us at Satoshi Action for why we have been so successful is because we've been able to provide not just podcasts and blogs and articles about why Bitcoin mining is powerful, but we've been able to produce credible evidence-backed, peer-reviewed research for the technology as well. And of course, my pride and joy, being labeled as the most effective and most aggressive advocacy organization by Greenpeace. I don't think they meant it as a compliment, but I wear it as a badge of honor. So let's get into the talk here, though. What is energy abundance, and why is it so important? I'm sure some of you have seen this graph before. On this graph, we are taking a look at how there is no such thing as a low energy rich country. What does that mean? That means that there is no country on this earth that is in the top of the GDP that also has very little energy abundance. So these two things are linked. Energy abundance, the availability of energy, is critical for a country, for a people, for a jurisdiction to be prosperous. And the impacts of not having energy abundance are stark. I was just traveling around earlier with my family who's lived here for 15 years, visiting some rural villages where there is not energy abundance. And a lot of these families struggle with some of the bare basics: lighting, refrigeration, cell phones, internet, medical care, heating and cooling, and more. And this is a problem all across the world. Anywhere that you don't see an increase or an amount of energy abundance, you see a serious lack of access to modern technologies that we all have come to appreciate today. But let's put it in context. How many people are dealing with a lack of energy abundance in the world today? Today, 685 million people do not have access, zero access to electricity. And 1.2 billion people have no access to affordable, reliable energy, essentially dooming them to have little to no access to a lot of the modern technologies that we all appreciate. But what is holding us back? Why are we still in this modern era where we're sitting in this giant room filled with speakers, filled with screens and cameras, live streaming? Why are we still unable to bring those 1.2 billion people into the modern era? I'll tell you, there's two primary reasons. There's many other little reasons, but we're going to keep it simple today. It's a lack of demand, and it's a lack of it's an underutilized infrastructure problem. So that might blow some people's minds. Like, how could a lack of demand be the problem for energy abundance or underutilizing our infrastructure? I'm about to break it down for you very simply. One of the best examples for how to understand the impacts of a lack of demand or utilization is to think of energy infrastructure like a shopping mall. Shopping malls are big, they're expensive to build, they're expensive to maintain. And in order for the economics of a shopping mall to work properly, you need it to be full. You need it to be highly utilized. Or as someone in the shopping mall industry would say, you need very low vacancy rates. You want your shopping mall to be thriving and filled with people. You want all the big department stores and all the little stores as well. In fact, it's those large department stores that truly subsidize and make it possible to really run a shopping mall. And shopping malls that see those big tenants leave, they see their vacancy rates go up, which means that the shopping mall is not being well utilized. If they get to a 30 to 40% vacancy rate, they enter what's known as a death spiral, and they cannot recover from it. And many shopping malls across the world, because of the pandemic, because of the modern era where we buy everything online, are experiencing these types of vacancy rates. So, how does that compare to the energy world? In the energy world, we use the word utilization rate. Very similar to vacancy, but ultimately, it is the high utilization, demand, the usage of those energy infrastructures that we build that lead to a distribution of costs. Just like in a shopping mall, where the large tenants are the ones that truly support the economics of those shopping malls, the large buyers of power are the ones that support the infrastructure that we see around us today. They essentially, large buyers of power, essentially subsidize the cost of power for everybody in that energy system. You would never go to a shopping mall and say, let's kick out the department stores, they're using up too much space. But yet we see people today saying, this person uses too much power, too much demand, we got to get them out of here. No, no, no. That is exactly the opposite of what you want to do. So, how is Bitcoin mining fitting into this picture? And why is it one of the most important large buyers of power that we see in the world today? Well, there's two really main reasons. One, it is extremely customizable to the infrastructure that you build alongside of it. So let's say you have an energy system, a grid, that has 100 megawatts of power, and you only have 10 megawatts of power left to sell. You can custom fit a Bitcoin mine to fit that 10 megawatts perfectly. Actually, in fact, Bitcoin mining can scale down to the kilowatt. So you can perfectly fit it to whatever the needs of that energy system are. And by ultimately getting to that last bit, that last 10 megawatts filled, you're dramatically improving the economics of that energy infrastructure. The second, unlike any other large buyer of power, because you could say, well, Dennis, why don't we just have, industry or a shopping mall? Why don't we build a hospital to fill up that last 10 megawatts? The problem with most grids is that if you get to that 99, 100% utilization, well, what happens if there's a hot day or a cold day and all of a sudden demand spikes? Well, you've gone over your available supply, and that can cause very serious problems for energy infrastructure. And so Bitcoin mining, what's so important to understand about it is not only can you custom fit it to exactly what that energy system needs, simultaneously, you can use the Bitcoin mining as a flexible demand on that energy system so that it never goes over the 100%. You never break the energy system. And additionally, you never have to spend extra money to build for those, what they call contingency events. So what's a good example? You've heard this one a lot. I reported on it right when it happened back in 2022. There's really two important weather storms that are so just very important for you to keep in your mind. Winter Storm Uri and Winter Storm Elliott. Winter Storm Uri came in 2021. It pummeled the Texas grid. They were not prepared, and there was billions of dollars of damages that were done to the grid. Additionally, over 700 people lost their lives. This is why the ability to balance the grid is so important. If you don't manage your grid properly, best case scenario, your food is going bad in your fridge. Worst case scenario, people are losing their lives. So, next storm to keep in mind. Winter Storm Uri comes in, pummels the grid, billions of dollars of damages, over 700 people die. But if we transport forward to Winter Storm Elliott, which came just a little over a year later and hit the Texas grid, the same exact, it was almost identical. Like it was like almost shocking how identical this storm was to Uri. The grid operators there in Texas were very concerned, but fortunately, they had done a lot of work to upgrade their grid and to prepare for new types of storms. And one of the things that they did is they enabled Bitcoin miners to come in and plug into the grid and participate in those grid balancing programs that previously already existed in the Texas ERCOT grid. Well, lo and behold, when that Winter Storm Elliott hit, the Bitcoin miners across the energy grid there wound down and delivered over 1,700 megawatts of power back to the grid in the middle of an emergency when everybody else was desperate to keep their heat on. Hospitals were desperate to stay online. The Bitcoin miners were the first line of defense to say, here you go. Here my power is available to you. Now you can keep the lights on. To put it in context, 1,700 megawatts of power is an incredible amount of energy. It is enough energy to heat 1.7 million small homes. It is enough energy to energize 320 large hospitals. It is more energy than some small nations use. So it's a lot of energy that can be delivered just like that, back to the grid when it needs it the most. And there's simply no other industry that can match this level of response. So Bitcoin mining, very good for as an emergency reserve backup system for flexibility. Another good caveat to keep in mind is it's very, very good at supporting renewable energy, extremely good at supporting renewable energy. There are renewable energy providers all across the world that are suffering from massive amounts of curtailment, which essentially means that they're not selling all the energy that they could produce. I speak to renewable energy generators across the world, and they are in huge trouble financially. Some of them are curtailing up to 30 to 40% of their energy, and there's just no one there to buy it. And so Bitcoin mining can serve as a perfect solution by coming in and co-locating next to these wind and solar farms, buying up every single megawatt, custom fit, buying up every single megawatt from these renewable energy sites, making sure that their economics pan out, and making sure that they can continue to supply energy to the grid and that they do not fail. And I'm telling you what, there is a huge glut of renewable energy in this world that has been subsidized to death, and a lot of them are about to go under. They're in serious trouble. So Bitcoin mining is very good for balancing the grid, very good for flexibility. But one of the important things to keep in mind when you're talking about energy abundance, circle back to how Bitcoin solves this problem of delivering energy to people that need it the most. One of the things that was very hard in the past, I talked about the need for more demand. It was nearly impossible to just say, oh, we're just going to create demand over here. Usually you need a big city. You need a hub. You need a lot of demand so that you can help to finance the generation. You need demand to finance generation. Without demand, you cannot have generation. And so what Bitcoin mining allows us to do for literally the first time in history, this is such a revolutionary technology. You can pinpoint demand wherever you want. And you can essentially create generation anywhere in the world now because of Bitcoin mining. This is what is truly going to be able to allow us to end energy poverty because, as I said, here in the middle in San Salvador, lots of demand, lots of energy all around us to supply everything that we need for this conference. Rural parts of El Salvador, not experiencing the same type of energy abundance because there isn't demand. But now, again, for the first time in history, we can place demand wherever we want, enabling us to build generation wherever we want. This is what's going to help us end energy poverty, predominantly in rural parts of the world. There are certainly benefits to the general grid that we see here, not only in El Salvador, but also other parts of the world. But I think there's a really unique case where Bitcoin mining can be used to develop energy in rural parts of the world. There's a great example. I don't know if he's spoken yet. He's certainly here today. But Eric from Gridless is doing just this in rural parts of Africa, where they have energy generation now being built, and they can come in as a partner and subsidize the excess generation that isn't being utilized. Think about it this way. Every megawatt of excess generation that isn't being monetized is a burden on the people that are left on that energy generation system. So by coming in and using all of that excess generation, they're essentially subsidizing the cost of power for rural African villages all across the continent of Africa. And this can be done anywhere in the world, not just in Africa. One thing to keep in mind, I talked about it a little bit earlier, but I think it's important to revisit it, is utilization rates. Now, for the first time ever, we can reach essentially peak utilization, 100%. Why? Revisiting back to the flexibility of Bitcoin mining, if we ever go over, we can ask the Bitcoin miner to wind down. Before Bitcoin mining, you would have had to build a gas peaker plant, had to build batteries, you'd have to import power from other grids. All of these are very expensive forms of ways to make sure that you don't go over your peak supply. A peaker plant sits on idle and is used maybe 1% to 2% of the year. That's not efficient. That's not high utilization. And so what it does is it causes a significant burden on the grid that it operates with, a necessary burden until Bitcoin mining. Peaker plants, in my opinion, may not exist within the next 10 years because of the technology of Bitcoin mining. So let's wrap it a bow around all of this. It's so much bigger than just energy. Yes, more energy is great. Yes, the idea of energy abundance is great, but what does it truly mean for the people that don't experience energy abundance, for the people that don't get to experience having the ability to go over and flip a switch and turn the light on? It means they can't have access to lights. What does that mean for someone to not have access to light? Something we take for granted at night in developed countries. It means you can't study at night. You're not going to be able to read your textbook as you're going to university. It means that people, when they're walking down the streets at night, there's no light. There's no safety, there's no security. So it's a significant difference just from lights alone. Think about refrigeration. Without energy abundance, you can't refrigerate your food. You can't save your food. So like every day, you're constantly having to go to the store to get new food. You're constantly having to cook new food every single day because you can't store it in a refrigerator. Just take a moment to think about how much more time you have to spend in meal preparation. So it's a huge time burden to the people that don't have access to refrigeration. And then, of course, work our way down the list. Cell phones, internet, medical care, heating and cooling. None of these things are truly available to people who don't have energy abundance, significantly diminishing their ability to have a successful life. I like to commonly say, those 1.2 billion people around the world who don't have energy abundance, one of them could be the next Einstein, but we'll never know because they were never able to study for school. They were never able to afford to make it to university. So by being a part of changing the world, by buying Bitcoin, you can become a stakeholder in the future of ensuring that all the countries below this line move above it. And by being a holder of Bitcoin, you are essentially an equity holder in the movement to end energy poverty globally. Thank you.